everyone, it's Mrs. D'Amato from the Old Ham School. I'm here today to read you another chapter of Frog and Toad Are Friends by Arnold Lobel. So let's see today what kind of adventure these two friends have together in a story called The Story. All right, let me show you the pictures as I read the story. I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Okay, so here is Frog and Toad Are Friends by Arnold Lobel, the cover of the book. And then remember, it's a chapter book. So we've read Spring, and we've read The Lost Button. And now today's story, like I said, is called The Story. One day in summer, Frog was not feeling well. Toad said, "Frog, you are looking quite green." "But I always look green," said Frog. "I am a frog." "Today you look very green, even for a frog," said Toad. "Get into my bed and rest." Toad made Frog a cup of hot tea. Frog drank the tea, and then he said, "Tell me a story while I am resting." "All right," said Toad. "Let me think of a story to tell you." Toad thought and thought, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. "I will go out on the front porch and walk up and down," said Toad. "Perhaps that will help me to think of a story." Toad walked up and down on the porch for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Then Toad went into the house and stood on his head. "Why are you standing on your head?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I stand on my head, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. Toad stood on his head for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. So see if you can notice all the different ways that Toad tries to think of a story to tell Frog. So this is the first thing. Well, first he walked back and forth on the porch. Now he's standing on his head trying to think of a story. Let's see what he does next. Then Toad poured a glass of water over his head. "Why are you pouring water over your head?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I pour water over my head, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. Toad poured many glasses of water over his head. Do you think that helped him think of a story to tell Frog? No, you're right. He could not think of a story to tell Frog. Then Toad began to bang his head against the wall. "Why are you banging your head against the wall?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I bang my head against the wall hard enough, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. "I am feeling much better now, Toad," said Frog. "I do not think I need a story anymore." "Then you get out of bed and let me get into it," said Toad, "because now I feel terrible." Frog said, "Would you like me to tell you a story, Toad?" "Yes," said Toad, "if you know one." So Toad's not feeling so well after standing on his head and pouring glasses of water on his head and then banging his head into the wall. So now he's going to rest while Frog tries to think of a story. "Once upon a time," said Frog, "there were two good friends, a frog and a toad. The frog was not feeling well. He asked his friend the toad to tell him a story. The toad could not think of a story. He walked up and down on the porch, but he could not think of a story. He stood on his head, but he could not think of a story. He poured water over his head, but he could not think of a story. Do you remember what he did next? He banged his head against the wall, but he could not think of a story. Then the toad did not feel so well, and the frog was feeling better. So the toad went to bed, and the frog got up and told the story. The end. How was that, Toad? Asked Frog. But Toad did not answer. He had fallen asleep. So that's another sweet story with Frog and Toad, where they, at the beginning of the story, Frog is not feeling well. You know, he looks green, which is funny because he's a frog, but he's looking more green than usual. And so Toad's a good friend. He's going to tell him a story. And the problem in the story was what? He couldn't think of a story to tell. So then Frog became the good friend. He let Toad lay down while he told him a story. And of course, he told the story of what just happened, of Toad trying to think of a story. So, and then what happened at the very end of the story? Well, Toad was sound asleep. So again, this was from Frog and Toad Are Friends by Arnold Lobel. Thanks for watching.